Hi folks, I'm Alan Watt and this is Cutting Through the Matrix on the 18th of December 2012. For newcomers, I advise you to make good use of the website cuttingthroughthematrix.com, and you'll see on that site a bunch of other ones listed. These are the official sites I have. They all carry audios for download. If you find sticking on any particular link, try another one. And also they carry transcripts in English for print up, all those sites. If you go into Alan Watt Sentinel.e, you'll find transcripts in other languages to choose from. And what I do is go through the history of the system we're living in, and it is a system. Some of it was based on sort of natural evolution, you may say societal evolution, that is. And societies do evolve. We're evolving right now as a society. Most folk don't know it. It's been done deliberately, of course, because it's run by science at the top. And what I go through is a history of these techniques, of course, down through the ages up to the present time, and then the foundations and organizations that got together, private organizations, a long time ago, and decided to bring in this world-type system, this world government, so that a few of a people, a minority actually, could rule the world. And it's pretty well here, actually. It truly is here. And bankers got together and formed the first big private organization openly for that, because it existed already in other forms in the 1800s, but they called themselves the Royal Institute for International Affairs, and they gave branches across the world called Council on Foreign Relations, and they admit in their own writings that they've been responsible for pretty well all the wars for the last 100 years, and no doubt about the present ones too. They're also responsible for bringing the European Union together, and they want a United Americas. And they've already done the same thing with a group that's still affiliated in the Far East. So 3 trading blocks basically under a world governmental system. And the IMF, the World Bank, the BIS, and the GATT Treaty and all the rest of it, the World Court, all these things are part of the structure of a world government as we go through the Great Transition, as they call it. So help yourself to the website, and remember that you bring me to you, because I'm not backed by advertisers or anything like that. And if you like what you hear, you can help me keep going by buying the books and discs at cuttingthroughthematrix.com. You can also donate, hopefully. And to do so, go into cuttingthroughthematrix.com and you'll see how to do it. From the US to Canada, remember, you can still use personal checks or international postal money orders. You can still send cash, and you can even use PayPal. And across the world, Western Union money, and you've got PayPal once again. But most folk are driven. We're all driven today by mass media and entertainment too. It's all one big conglomerate, really. And even what you see in entertainment is indoctrinating you to the next step and the next step and the next step. So you'll think that whatever changes are put out by governments are inevitable, and nothing is further from the truth. There's many ways society could go, but we're guided along the way it's supposed to go, according to the ones who already own the world. And down through history, there have been dominant minorities. Huxley's gone through that, other people too. There's always been dominant minorities in every age. And even the dominant minority of America has changed to a different dominant minority, for instance, that brings in their culture. And they've adapted to that without even knowing about it. All they see is the fallout, but they don't know what's wrong. So we're going through, as a system, a change, as I say, into the world government, dreamed by many for a long, long time. Some are utopians. Many of the followers are utopians. The ones at the top are not utopian at all. They know exactly what they're doing, and they want to depopulate the world as we go along into this great plan, of course, because you see science rules supreme at the top, and academia is completely on board with all of this agenda, all of it. So it's just astonishing. So help yourself to the website, and we'll be back with more after this break. Hi folks, I'm back cutting through the matrix, and it's astonishing for a lot of people to see the ridiculous stories that are out today to do with climate change, even though I've read so many articles over the years from the top sources themselves and the organizations that make up this whole movement, where their leaders come out and tell you that they always give you terrifying, scary scenarios to make us listen to them so they can get what they want. And some of them even say, even if it's all science, if it's all bogus science, then the intention is good because it's going to redistribute the wealth across the world. So that's the real intention of it. It's part of the real intention of it, at least. And of course, they're doing that, and what they're really doing is giving your cash to their own corporations across the world. They're international corporations. They're international, right? So wherever they put some in third world countries, whatever, still the same corporations. And so big things are happening as we run by chronology, and that's what I call it, chronology. There's a good article about climate change here. It says the aboriginal climate change. It says the entire premise of man-made climate change is that we, mankind, because of our modern industrial lifestyle, have altered the natural order of the climate system. And this is bad. It's so bad that mankind needs to do something to fix what we've done and stop what we're doing. More and more, however, it seems that the climate change academia complex is undermining their own case for the very premise which is the foundation of their theory. Not to mention the considerable taxpayer funding. It's easy to see how this happens. Academics know that there's a honeypot of money for any research going to do with climate change, combined with their underlying faith in the reality of man-made climate change, conduct studies, which to an objective observer actually undermines their case. But the academics acts as another warning to the uninformed public. So the other day this writer pointed out a report of a study on how climate change had helped lead to the downfall of the Mayan Empire. The authors seemed not to realize that their findings went a long way towards undermining the man-made ingredient of the entire theory, because the Mayans, they didn't have what we call heavy industry. Everything that the alarmist community is trying to sell society is dependent on the idea that we are experiencing or will experience. What we're going to do is unprecedented and, of course, man-made. So when they do studies which show that conditions in the past were as bad or worse than what we're experiencing or forecast to experience, a reasonable person would ask, how have we impacted the climate if the climate has always acted this way? This is again, we have another example of a study disproving man-made climate change out of the University of Queensland called Ancient Culture Affected by Climate. The Associate Professor Hamish McGowan from University of Queensland's School of Geography, Planning and Environmental Management said the studies in the Northwest Kimberley have shown there was a rapid change in climate around 5,500 years ago. It could be rapid change in climate 5,500 years ago in Aboriginal Australia. That sort of put a damper on the whole unprecedented, not to mention man-made claims of today's far less dramatic events. If you want to talk about some serious climate disruption, consider this. Research shows that the likely reason for the demise of the Guyana artist was a mega drought spanning approximately 1,500 years. A mega drought lasting 1,500 years without benefit of a modern society's fossil-fueled input. Is that even possible? What would cause such a thing? And then brought on by changing climate conditions that caused the collapse of the Australian summer monsoon. If naturally occurring changing climate conditions could cause such havoc, I consider a 1,500-year-long drought severe. Why are our modern-day soothsayers so convinced that we are responsible for far less dramatic climate change? Just another example of pre-industrial severe climate change, far exceeding anything which sends the alarmist community into apocalyptic tizzydom, it says here. So I'll put that up tonight. It's quite a good, it's true enough too, when the same climatologists come out with what happened a long time ago before we were even on the go sometimes, how can they say that it's all caused by us today? Or it's a lot less severe. Also tonight too, I'll put an article on the International Monetary Fund. Again, we're trained, you understand, to believe that all these institutions that created themselves, because we didn't vote for any of these institutions like the United Nations, World Bank, or anything like that, or even the G20 for that matter. It says, when the IMF says it will rescue Greece, and so the IMF is this topic, we're all providing the funding. And here's how the IMF works. With a 40 billion euro European money commitment to the bailout of Greece in the first week of May and 250 billion euro commitments to the EU's Eurozone stabilization mechanism a week later, the curious amongst us may ask, where does the IMF get its money? The short answer is from all its members countries, including Australia. In other words, we're all funding the IMF's activities. We all pay into it. Well, they all signed into this, all the countries, along with when they did the United Nations stuff. So just to understand how this works in practice, it's useful to consider the history of the IMF and its function. The IMF was conceived in July 1944 when representatives of 45 countries meeting in the town of Bretton Woods, New Hampshire, in northeastern US, agreed on a framework for international economic cooperation to be established after the Second World War. This is where the Bretton Woods Agreement on relatively fixed exchange rates came from. The founders believed that such a framework was necessary to avoid a repetition of the disastrous economic policies that had contributed to the Great Depression. Since then, the world has changed dramatically, but the IMF's main purpose to provide global public good of financial stability has remained unchanged. More specifically, the IMF continues to provide a forum for cooperation on international monetary problems, facilitate the growth of international trade, promote exchange rate stability, and lend countries foreign exchange when needed. So you've got to pay massive amounts into it every year. Every country does this, even if you don't borrow from them. The IMF is a specialized agency of the United Nations, with its own charter and governing structure, which they drafted up themselves, of course. It's got a membership of 186 countries, with each assigned a quota that determines a country's maximum financial commitment to the IMF and its voting power. Australia's quota is SDR 3.2 billion, and the US, as the largest member, has a quota of SDR 37.1 billion. SDR is the acronym for Special Drawing Rights. The IMF's own currency, created in 1969, is an international reserve asset and is based on a basket comprised of the British pound, the euro, the Japanese yen, and the United States dollar, but its value is measured in US dollars daily. So as for how the IMF funds its activities, firstly from the quotas. Each member must pay 25% of its quota to the IMF upon joining. Furthermore, quotas are reviewed every 5 years for a possible increase. Well, I'll tell you what it really is, you see. Because the Royal Institute for International Affairs, a private organization of bankers that funded the CFR and created them too. This organization actually picks and selects every prime minister for the last 100 years in all the Commonwealth countries and other countries now, too, including the EU. They decided a long time ago that they would bring in a world-type system, which was called the League of Nations, and then they created the United Nations. And then they said they would bring in a bank of international settlements, and then with all their private central banks, the BIS, Bank for International Settlements, would deal with all the countries' cash. We're all put down, you understand, as basically slaves. Every single country to the bankers. Now, the Bank for International Settlements is a private group again. And the World Bank is a private group again. And the IMF is a private group again, with its own charters I've just read and governing structure. And they're now telling countries, such as all the ones belonging to the EU bloc, the new Soviet bloc, that they've got to keep bailing out Greece or Spain or this country. And you've got 11 days to pay up when they demand money from you. Because you're a member. You signed on to all that nonsense. So all the citizenry of the world basically is signed on to this pretty well, all the big countries, as perpetual slavery. And then if you borrow from the World Bank, the IMF comes in, like the heavy, and they run your country. And they cut back your health care and everything, your slash pensions, the whole lot, until you're not paid it off. They don't want you to pay it off. They want you to be in debt. But they want you to get to a certain standard, and then you take over again. The IMF helped run Britain, for instance, when Maggie Thatcher was, and most folk didn't know that. Yeah. So, I noticed too, also building up tonight too, the Philippines just joined it, and their quota to join it, it says $500 million. That's what Philippines, of all places, this dirt poor, has to pay to get in. And God's help them when they're in. Mind you, the boys who sign on to it, the top, and in the power structure, the dominant minority again, will rake in the cash in their lifetime, and they'll flog it amongst their own families and all the rest of it. You'll know that's what happens. And then the rest of the country's left with a massive, massive debt, of course, which they'll never pay off. So that's what your IMF is for those that want to. And I'll put this whole article, it's only part of the article, I'll put the whole thing up tonight, as I say, too, and the one on the Philippines joining it as well. That's what it says, Philippines to contribute $500 million. to an IMF facility. So bankers run the world as it was set up to do by those who formed the Royal Institute for International Affairs. It was all big top bankers and even for some of the first heads that they had were chairmen of different big banks themselves. Now, image making is a big thing in this day and age. And there's a massive machinery, of course. I've mentioned about how they make stars of all kinds, whether it's music or acting or whatever. It's all done by a massive machinery. And they can make anybody a star today. Anybody at all, pretty well. And that's if they want you, they can rake enough money off you in the meantime. But also, too, you forget that all your media does its own public relations. In Canada here, for instance, they'll have ads on television talking about the most trusted man in Canada, Mr. Mansbridge, who gives you your mainstream news from the government-owned CBC, Television and Radio Corporation. But I'll get back on this topic when I come back from this break. Hold on. Hi folks, I am back, cutting through the matrix and talking about the system that we live in too, and how they create reputations for corporations and companies and so on. And you'll find that even if people sell books and they go on programs, they're told to keep repeating their book all the way through it, for instance, or their name or whatever. That's how the marketing works. And you forget that actually creating a reputation, and it's called that in the business too. Just like when you're building the same thing for movie stars or whatever, it's reputation, create reputation. And it's done through repetition. But there's an ad I'll put up today too. It's called Content Writers Needed Today. And Pennsylvania is. And it says reputation changer. Reputation. The number one online reputation management company in the country. Is also a major online publisher with 1,000 content sites covering news, entertainment, lifestyle, business, and so on. Currently seeking full and part-time contract writers and the right candidates who possess strong command of English, blah, 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 and journalism, etc. They'll be required to generate articles based on current trends. So they cash in on all the trends that are working and breaking news stories and so on. And it says they'll also be tasked with creating original, compelling content for client blogs and websites. So you understand, you also help create the reputation of the clients. You also, in those jobs too, you find ways, and some companies find ways to take down nasty things about clients. You pay a lot of cash for that, for reputation changing, either way. So I'll just put that up tonight to show you that it's everything today, everything out there, takes a lot of cash to get done. And to create the right kind of image, you might say. So I'll put that up tonight. But reputation changer, I thought was quite a good one. And we know for a fact too that lots of stuff gets put up on, for instance, those who want to bring the population in their world down, etc. Japan just dropped a whole part of an article. They were forced to drop it from about Bill Gates wanting to depopulate the world, so they retracted different parts out of the whole article so that the Japanese wouldn't see that part at all, that he's actually into eugenics and wants to massively depopulate the world. So big money talks, of course, and that's why all media is controlled by the few, you know. And they give you your opinions, they give you your thoughts, and they give you your reality, in fact. Because that's where your reality comes from, is information. And it's all the same information coming from 1,000 sources. You don't realize it's all owned by the same people who own chains and chains of media. Now, talking about the banks and IMF and all the rest of it too, they're putting little fish out there for the public to see for the first time from the banking disasters. It says 2 former hedge fund managers are found guilty in insider trading case. It says Todd Newman was found guilty of fraud and conspiracy in an insider trading case. Luis Lanzano, Associated Press, it says, told Newman was found guilty of fraud and conspiracy in insider trading. So 2 former hedge fund managers were found guilty on Monday. It says they're the latest convictions in the government's campaign to eliminate illegal conduct on Wall Street trading floors. Well, they're not going to do that because you have to clean the whole lot of them out. It says, after 2 full days of deliberations, a jury convicted Anthony Chason, co-founder of Level Global Investors, and Todd Newman, a former portfolio manager at Diamondback Capital Management. The two had denied charges that they could participate in a conspiracy that made more than $70 million illegally trading technology stocks. And it goes into the whole story and so on. But, even at that, 70 million during the massive scam that's going on is peanuts. So they're putting a small fry out there for the public to say, oh, well, they're doing something about it. Because it's going to happen again, you know. The whole system and industry is based on chronology again. The whole system is. And this is interesting too, but the pressure, talking about the pressure again of image making or and so on, and keeping reputation or creating reputation. It says Newtown school shootings, a U.S. private equity firm, money firm, has said it's to sell its stake in the maker of the AR-15 style rifle used in Newtown school shootings. It says Cerberus Capital Management's move came after pressure from one of its own biggest investors. And guess where its biggest investor was? The California State Teachers Retirement System. So Cerberus bought Bushmaster in 2006 and more gun makers since, merging them into Freedom Group, which it will now sell. The firm said it wanted to avoid being drawn into the gun control controversy. The announcement by Cerberus came 4 days after 20 young children and so on, 6 adults were killed by 20-year-old gunman Adam Lanza at Sandy Hook Elementary School in Newton, Connecticut. So there you go. This is the power too of keeping reputation, and it's a power too of pressure from some of the biggest unions and their retirees out there. Incredible wealth out there to put pressure on folk to draw your, if you don't drop this, we'll just pull our pensions and so on from you and put it into another company. Massive. Same with advertising too. If you say the wrong things about certain things, there'll be certain organizations immediately will have all the ads that you have and whatever you're doing pulled off of you. They put pressure on advertisers to do so. This is the real world that you live in. And the CIA, what is the CIA? Who runs it really? Who really runs it? You understand it's a shadow government in a sense. And even politicians can't find out what they're really up to most of the time. Or who staffs it. They have their guys who's supposed to be in charge of it, but are they really even? We'll talk about that when I come back from this break.
You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network. Because you can handle the truth.
Hi folks, I'm back. We're cutting through the matrix, talking about the CIA and what really are they? What is the CIA? Who's in it? And are they even American? Is another thing too. We know about double agents and all the rest of it from all the Cold War era, and I'm sure they've got lots of the same thing going on in, say, the MI6 and CIA today. So who runs it? But anyway, to do with the CIA of today, it says the European Court of Human Rights has ruled German citizen Khaled El-Masri was tortured by CIA agents. The first time the court has described treatment meted out by the CIA as torture. It takes them a while in government to actually get, the picture sort of thing. CIA agents tortured a German citizen by sodomizing and shackling and then beating him. As Macedonian state police looked on, the European Court of Human Rights said in a historic judgment released on Thursday. In a unanimous ruling, it also found Macedonia guilty of torturing, abusing and secretly imprisoning Khaled El-Masri, who's a German of Lebanese origin, allegedly linked to terrorist organizations. He was seized in Macedonia December 2003, handed over to a CIA rendition team at Skopje airport and secretly flown to Afghanistan. It's the first time the court has described it, as even torture. The Grand Chamber, imagine getting just a bag put over your head and away you go. The Grand Chamber of the European Court of Human Rights unanimously found that Mr. El-Masri was subjected to forced disappearance. Well, I'd call it that, yeah. unlawful detention, extraordinary rendition outside any judicial process, and inhuman and degrading treatment, said James Golson, Executive Director of the Open Society Justice Initiative. He described the judgment as an authoritative condemnation of some of the most objectionable tactics employed in the post-9/11 war on terror. It should be a wake-up call for the Obama administration and U.S. courts, he told The Guardian. For them to continue to avoid serious scrutiny of CIA activities was simply unacceptable, he said. Well, they can say a lot until they make a law, nothing changes, right? Jamil Dakwar of the American Civil Liberties Union described the ruling as a huge victory for justice and the rule of law, but it still doesn't do anything. I won't change anything. Use of CIA interrogation methods, widely denounced as torture during the Bush administration's war on terror, also came under scrutiny in Congress Thursday. The U.S. Senate's Select Committee on Intelligence was expected to vote on whether to approve a mammoth review it has undertaken into the controversial practices that included waterboarding, stress positions, forced nudity, beatings, and sleep and sensory deprivation. The report that runs to almost 6,000 pages based on a 3-year review of more than 6 million pieces of information is believed to conclude that the enhanced interrogation techniques adopted by the CIA during the Bush years did not produce any major breakthroughs in intelligence, contrary to previous claims. The committee, which is dominated by the Democrats, is likely to vote to approve the report, though opposition from the Republican members may prevent the report ever seeing light of day. The Strasbourg court said it found Masri's account of what happened to him to be established beyond reasonable doubt, and that Macedonia had been responsible for his torture and ill treatment both in the country itself and after his transfer to the U.S. authorities in the context of an extrajudicial rendition. There's no papers or anything handed over. They just grab you and away you go. So it goes through the whole history, how the Macedonian police took this guy to a hotel in Skopje, where he was kept locked in a room for 23 days and questioned in English, despite his limited proficiency in the language, about his alleged ties with terrorist organizations, the court said in its judgment. His requests to contact the German embassy were refused. At one point, when he said he intended to leave, he was threatened with being shot. Masri's treatment at the airport at the hands of the CIA rendition team being severely beaten, sodomized, shackled, and hooded, and subjected to a total sensory deprivation had been carried out in the presence of state officials of Macedonia and within its jurisdiction, the court ruled. But it was the CIA who did it all, including the sodomizing. I mean, doesn't that make you wonder what kind of culture you have left? Who runs your culture? You better ask these questions, folks, because it's not American. This is not American. It's not the old America. That's all gone. All gone. The whole culture is gone. It added its government was consequently responsible for these acts performed by foreign officials, and it had failed to submit any arguments explaining or justifying the degree of force used or necessity of the invasive and potentially debasing measures. And it goes on and on and on. Anyway, nothing is going to change, as I say. It's quite a nasty report. That's only a fraction of it. But this guy was released in 2004, taken blindfolded, handcuffed by plane to Albania and subsequently to Germany after the CIA admitted he was wrongly detained. This is after they did it all, including buggering him. That's what they do these days. Now, Facebook's photo-sharing site Instagram has updated its privacy policy, giving itself the right to sell users' photos to advertisers without notification. But what do you expect with Facebook's? What was it that the owner of it called the general public? Do you remember that? So, effing idiots. Do you remember that? Do you remember that, folks? What do you expect? And there's a caller hanging on here from the UK. It's Pat. We'll see if Pat's still there. Hello?
Yeah, hi Alan. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, how are you? Yep.
Very good, thanks so much. I hope it's not getting too cold in your neck of the woods. It probably is, Canada, but yeah, chilly here, but not as quite as cold as last week when we had snow and everything. Interesting what you're just saying about the IMF earlier on. I think that probably I'll ask you a question, whether you think this is true, that obviously, the IMF, it has that nice sort of benevolent name, International Monetary Fund, to sort of let it appear as to be, a benign sort of organization that helps countries out that are going through a little bit of a tough time and helps them out in a nice way, in an easy way and everything. But of course, it is a predatory globalist organization as far as I can see it, and they've got Ireland in the grips of things. Now, then they also operate under its own fractional reserve type of deal, under its own protocol. Whereas if a member subscription is, as you mentioned, 500 million, what it really can do is it can leverage that on its own books 9 times or 10 times or whatever it's decided. So it actually becomes the potential to lend or to buy up debt or to lend 10 times that. So it could effectively then, with all the other nations, 9 times that amount. So therefore that can become sort of 5 billion. So that therefore becomes a snare and entrapment to whatever country it lends to the tune of 5 billion. And of course it then creates all this money from nothing. And then, of course, it demands its interest payments in gold. So it won't. That's what I've heard. So it won't even accept its own fiat money back in interest. It wants gold. So this is really like a kind of global monster and perpetual debt machine, which is designed to ensnare whole nations. And I'm surprised how we got out. We were in it in the time of Dennis Healy briefly. I don't know how we managed to get out of it. I mean, we did get out of it eventually. But am I right or am I completely wrong?
Oh, you're absolutely right on that, because the IMF is the world's biggest purchaser of gold for themselves. You're quite right. And they do demand payment in gold, and they're not a sort of charitable institution that lends money and you pay it back on an equal sum or a small amount of interest. They have quite a lot of interest, believe you me. Ask the third world countries that they've been demolishing across the world for its whole existence, in fact. So it's a huge institution, and it's private, and they're just raking in cash like you wouldn't believe. And they put whole nations down. When your country signs on to it, they're putting you down as a guarantor, all the citizenry down, to pay off any debts that they may incur if they borrow money from the IMF, or even if the IMF demands money from them, like Britain right now. Because I was reading the papers too, that the latest EU thing to do with the IMF and the central bank, they've got the EU bank there, it's all part of the same system. When they demand so many millions from Britain to bail somebody out, Britain's given about 11 or 12 days to pay it up, or else. That's what they say. That's what it said in the paper. So we're in this perpetual scam where a minority at the top are just plundering the planet under various guises of almost charitable organizations. Yeah.
Yeah, it does so much have that ring about it. And of course, it's funny how I remember a while ago hearing a speech from one of the UKIP people. And he was talking, he mentioned this thing, we still have got fractional reserve banking. And it just seems that fractional reserve banking has just been the scourge of our society for the last 100 years, allowing this perpetual debt machine and the creation of money out of nothing based upon, and Europe and Canada, and of course you've got that brilliant graphics artist who created all that animated series, Money is Debt, and of course it's got to version 3 now about possible solutions, which is a phenomenal, eye-opening video all about how banks create money. Very few people know this,
I know.
About how very few people know what banks are up to. How the people that tell us don't know what goes on. They don't know that when you sign on the loan agreement that the bank never had that money in the first place, and that banks create money. I mean, you could dive a whole series to about that particular subject. Maybe.
The problem is, though, that there's lots of stuff over the years I've read on this very topic, and it's not that the information has been suppressed. There's lots of stuff out there going through this in great detail, in every country, in fact. But nothing changes, because all the minorities that run your countries are in on the big scam. And even that video that's put out about Canada, that used to at one time, in fact, it escaped the Great Depression as opposed to other countries. Other countries came to Canada to see what we were doing differently. And that time you had a bank that literally sold the cash that you're printing to the banks, the private banks, you see. And so they made about 10 cents profit on everything, and that helped run the government as well. And the banks couldn't do this fractional reserve thing. So this fractional reserve thing, for every dollar you now put in, I think they can lend out 11 times for that $1. They can put $11 out there. If you go into a bank now, and they do a deal, say for $500,000, and they won't say, here's the cash, because they don't have the cash, as you say, in the bank. They simply open an account for you and put that cash in it right away. So it's just a sum of money printed in a book, a checkbook, and that's your loan. They have just created money out of nothing. Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, well, they're able to get around that by loan fees and things like that, which they add because they're meant to have so much on reserve before they can do the loan. But by charging you a fee, which they show separately on their books and actually add to the loan in some cases, that gives them their fractional reserve or their basis to leverage it whatever number of times. And it works like that. I mean, as you know, over here we've still got building societies. They're fast disappearing, but I mean, there's another merger recently at Barnsley or something. They probably work in a similar way, although much stricter and to not a greater degree that they can leverage things.
Yes.
But there's no sign, I mean, you know, of fractional reserve lending ever ending or being brought to book, basically, in the midst of all the other things that they get up to.
Mm-hmm. It won't change. It will never change because the whole idea of this central banks and changing into this new system was brought out by, as I say, the Royal Institute for International Affairs, a private organization in England. And the Council on Foreign Relations is just, I say, the American branch of the same thing. And they have one for the European Union now too, for all the politicians. They run the whole show. But every prime minister, literally, and this is from their own records, for the last 100 years has been a member of, they select them, doesn't matter what party it is, they select them. And it's worthwhile getting all their books on it, because they push books out every year on themselves. But what's interesting is that they designed this whole system of fractional reserve banking. They were the ones behind the Bretton Woods Agreement that started the whole thing in the first place. And then when they asked Prime Minister Martin, it was in Canada, that's in that excellent documentary of Oh Canada. I'll put that up again tonight to show you how it's done, this whole scam in Canada. He interviews the ex-prime ministers like Martin and so on. And he asked Martin why debt was good for Canada, because that's what Martin said. He says the more debt we have is good for Canada, but he couldn't explain why it was good for Canada. So these guys are all in on the scam because they're selected by this institution, you understand. What it does is give a small select bunch of people total political control over every country. That's what it does. And its economy and its future. This is a whole scam. Everything revolves around cash and money. And the power of the purse to tax you, to bring you into austerity, to do whatever they want to do, is all in their hands because it's all a fake money system. And the banks, literally, as you say, to lend out money, they go into all the money that's owed to them, and they say, well, if this all was in, well, we could lend this money out. So they lend it out as though they had all that money in, but it's all IOUs that they've got out there, nothing else. Yeah, that's how it works. Yeah, it's power.
Yeah, okay. Well, that's very interesting. Thanks so much, Alan. I hope the rest of the program goes well. Good night.
Good night and take care. Yep.
Bye.
Bye now. And I'll put that Oh Canada up again. That link is excellent. It goes through it so simply, so easily. Talks to all the ex-prime ministers and guys who are presently in government, and you'd be surprised how none of them know how money works at all, except the ones at the very top. And they say that debt is good. The more debt you have, the better it is. Well, it is to hold on to power and have people scared, terrified, and so on. That's what power is, you see. But that's the system that we live in. Now, another article tonight too is to do with the changing face, you might say, of humanity. Not just their face, but we're being really loaded by chemicals and synthetic hormones and so on. This article says human and synthetic hormones now contaminate fresh produce. And it says hormones under hormone mimicking chemicals are omnipresent environmental contaminants found in places such as varied as our teeth, such as dental sealant, is in that, to our paper products, receipts, money, and so on, our meat, to our canned foods, because they line the cans with the bisphenol A and different kinds. New research now indicates that even fresh whole vegetables and fruits are no longer immune to the growing biological and chemical threat. The newly released study has found that a variety of substances with hormone-disrupting properties now widely contaminate commercially available fresh vegetables and fruits, in some cases at concentrations exceeding the recommended acceptable daily intake for children, as recommended by the joint FAO, which is World Health Organization. And I don't trust him at all. I don't think we should have any acceptable levels on these poisons. Published this month in the Journal of Agriculture and Food Chemistry, researchers at the Indian River Research and Education Center, University in Florida, IFAS, found the synthetic endocrine disrupting chemicals bisphenol A and nonylphenol, it's called NP, and the natural steroidal estrogen 17B estradiol in vegetables and fruits randomly sampled from local markets using gas chematography and tandem mass spectrometry. According to the researchers, the BPA was detected in all vegetables and fruit samples ranging from, and it tells you the ranging scale they use, indicating significant exposure potential for humans. Nonylphenol, a chemical in the alkyphenol class, mainly used to manufacture detergents, was detected in pumpkins, sweet potatoes, citrus, and apple samples. Concentrations of 17, I think it's B estradiol, in vegetables and fruits range from, and it tells you again, except those in tomato and strawberry. The highest concentrations of BPA were found in potatoes, lettuce, and contained the highest concentration of natural estrogens. Back with more after this break. Hi folks, I'm back cutting through the matrix, and I'll go to, is it Leaf in California on the line? Hello? Yes.
I was just calling in to comment on the fact of being awake to all of this. It's taken me several years to finally fully wake up. And I've got to say that it's relieving to know what's going on, but it's also really aggravating to not be able to talk about it with a lot of people around me, just because it takes so much information to bridge from where they are watching football to where I am knowing what I know.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any advice for that? What's the best starting point for waking somebody up that you would say?
You never overdose them off the bat, basically, with what you know. You pick something that's relevant to them. They can associate or connect with higher taxes for them, why it's happening, what austerity means, things like that. You can things that may affect their jobs, like the corporations moving to China, things like that. All of those things they can associate with and understand and identify with. And then if the person's receptive, then eventually, maybe the next time you see them or a couple of meetings later, you can actually add a little bit more, but never overdose them, or you'll sound like a cook to them. They are living in the authorized reality. And it's worked awfully well on everybody. That's your daily news, your daily media. It's a complete structural matrix, basically, that conditions them. And they can't break out of it by hitting them with too many things at one go. So it's got to be relevant to them, as I say, something that they can understand and affects them personally. And some will get stuck there. They won't go beyond anything just what affects them personally, because people today are pretty well selfish. That's the system that was introduced into they called it hedonism, and they created that culture. They designed it back in the 50s. Russell talks about it. So they might not care about anything else. Other ones might. So it depends on the individual that you're actually talking to. You'll suss them out rather quickly, pretty well. But the main thing is never overdose them, and don't hit on your relatives and folk you know, because you'll end up losing them all. You know, you will. I've known people who've been either thrown out of the house or split families up. That's quite common too. If a man wakes up or the woman wakes up and the other partner doesn't. That's quite common. So don't bulldoze your way through in a panic phase, because don't be in a panic phase. Just put it over very sensibly, logically, quietly, and see what feedback they give you in the conversation. That tells you where they are and if you can actually help them to wake up. Some will grasp what you're saying and they'll come to you for more information. So that's really how to do it. Be very careful if you don't want to lose people. It's not their fault. They're conditioned. They're completely perfect. It's called perfect conditioning.
Well, yeah, most of the people that I work with at my job, for instance, are fantastic people, but they're absolutely mad about football, and that's one of the most aggravating things for me. And I think back to your talk in Alex Jones' movie about how the sports culture was given to us. Mm-hmm. And I see that so clearly, but it's so hard to figure out how to bridge into explaining that without sounding like a cook, you know?
And remember, too, your workplace, too, that this banter of sports is also a technique that guys naturally use. Otherwise, most of them would never associate with each other in that workplace. It's a workplace that they have to associate, and that's the only training they've been given is a macho thing, and they present that as a macho thing. But really, most of them wouldn't even be friends at all, or know each other if they were left in just average life. So don't think because they're all workmates that they are workmates. That they're individuals like anywhere else across the country.
Thank you very much.
That's what to do. From Hamish myself from Ontario, Canada, it's good night. I mean, your God or your gods go with you.